on, guys? It's a beautiful, hot and humid day today in Nashville, Tennessee. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today, something called the rule of thirds. It's where you divide your camera and your screen into 9 equal parts. Kind of looks like a tic-tac-toe board. And what you do with that is you use that to align things like people and horizons and different objects along those lines to kind of get some areas of interest, to create some leading room for people or things who might be walking or moving through a frame. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to show you some examples of people, objects, and horizons using the lower thirds grid. So let's get right to it. I'll start with some footage here of downtown Nashville. Here is a really good simple example if you have, for a horizon, if you have something in your horizon like a sidewalk in the distance where you can see there's a pretty clear line of the horizon in front of you. A lot of people will stick their horizon right there in the middle, but sometimes you have the better choice to make is to do either one of two things. If your focus is on some subjects here in the front, you may want to close off your horizon on that top rule of thirds line right there. Or if you're just going for a beauty shot and you want more of the sky, you can close that off with the bottom line of your horizon right here of your bottom horizontal rule of thirds line. And also, as you can see, I'm also closing off this building right here, right on that other rule of thirds line. This building right here behind me is an awesome example of using the rule of thirds and is a great example for all future uses of buildings. I'll show you a few different examples. This awesome building right here is great to learn with. Buildings that stand out are really good to learn with using the rule of thirds. So let's go ahead, I'll flip this around and let's take a look at the famous Batman building here in Nashville. Here we have that famous Batman building that everybody loves here in Nashville, Tennessee. One of the things that people tend to do with buildings is put them directly in the middle of their shot. And not only that, but they think the kind of the balance point of the building should be all the way in the middle as well. And what you do is you gain a little space up here that you don't necessarily need at the time. What you want to show off is this building right here. And so what happens is, yes, you do end up getting all of that building in your shot, but you lose so much composition wise. So what I would recommend for a building like this is to not only kind of put its center of balance, or kind of its eyes, the eyes of its face, if that makes sense, and drop it on this top horizon line, and then also scoot this building over to balance it out on the other rule of thirds line right here on the left side. You could also do the right side depending on what you're going for, and that creates a little bit more balance in your shot. You can see kind of a horizon line that we've got going right here, and so not only does this give opportunity to put our building here on this rule of thirds line, this top left horizontal line, and have an intersecting point between the top horizon line and the left line, but also gives us an opportunity to use this bottom kind of horizon line right here to cover the horizon and kind of add another element of the rule of thirds into our shot. And it makes a much better image overall than just kind of sticking our building right there in the middle without any concern for using the rule of thirds. So there's with the rule of thirds, and then there's without. You can definitely see a difference composition wise, and it just kind of feels better as an overall image. This is definitely an example of extremes, and I'm actually kind of happy to be able to show this to you, because although there's nothing in the center of my shot, if I wanted to get a shot from where I am, if I could only get a shot from this angle and had to include the AT&T building and the Pinnacle building right here, this is how I would do it. Now let me explain what I mean with that. So obviously I can't just put one thing in the middle or even on one of the rule of thirds line, even if they look good. I want both in the frame. So in order to balance that out, I have to find an even distance between the edges of the frame and the two buildings. So what that allows me to do is to create a balance that is balanced between the edges of the frame and the buildings, and also from the end of the rule of thirds line on outward to the building. Now sometimes it doesn't always work out like that, and I also need to balance them in the frame height-wise. I don't want to make the Batman building perfect and then exclude the Pinnacle building, or try to get the Pinnacle building balanced and leave this one kind of hanging out to dry. I need to leave a little bit of room above here, and a little bit of room. You see that kind of balances out for the top horizontal line for the rule of thirds line. So that's kind of an example of extremes, but I hope you can understand what that gives you as far as composition when you have to balance out kind of uneven objects. One of the other things that I wanted to mention about using the rule of thirds in video, especially if your subject is moving, most of the time you'll constantly want to keep them within whatever rule of thirds framing you already had them in, kind of close to begin with. If they're going to be walking in a certain direction, you'll want to keep that lead room that you had in front of them. If you're going to be moving and you want to keep a building in frame, you will want to keep the building along that rule of third line that you have already established. It's a little bit harder with videos than photo, only because either you or the subject might be moving at all times, and so keeping that framing from beginning to end is something that will need to be thought out beforehand, or just kind of controlled if you have no idea where the shot is going to. What a lot of people do with shots is something called blocking. If it's a shot that you can plan out, you'll kind of plan out the movement of everybody within your frame from beginning to end, and that way you can know where you need to move the camera so you can establish and keep that rule of thirds framing throughout the entire picture. What we're doing here is we're aligning a person up with two things. We're lining him up on the right side. We can do the right or the left side of our rule of thirds line, the vertical lines. And then what we're also doing is lining his eyes up with the horizontal top line. That's where you'll always want to keep the eyes. And so it's better to keep him either on the right side of this shot, or since he's kind of facing this way a little bit, it's good to keep him on the left side over here to kind of give him some what we call lead room. We'll do that for a lot of people, so that we can have a little empty space here in the composition of the shot from the way that he might be facing. If he was facing a little bit more this way, we could also do this. And so this is a good example of how to line up a person within your rule of thirds. Here's going to be another example of using the rule of thirds with Willie, aka Street Reacha. What I want to point out is how we're lining his eyes up using the rule of thirds and his body. If we're doing an interview, this is some similar situation to where you would line somebody up with your camera just like this. The rule of thirds is one of those rules where it's something that I think is super important to learn as soon as you pick the camera up. One of the cool things about every camera and even every phone is there's usually a rule of thirds grid that you can add, and it will appear on top of your screen with cameras, with your cell phones. I believe every camera or everything that can record has this ability to add that rule of thirds grid, and you'll see it'll look like a tic-tac-toe grid on your screen when you are filming. This dramatically helps your ability to capture images in the rule of thirds. It's a good habit to just keep it on and kind of get a muscle memory for what looks like a rule of thirds shot and what does not. My guide for you, if you are new to video and filmmaking, is to have this grid on at all times and use it and make it the primary focus of your next couple shoots. Make sure every object, even before you press that record button, fits within the rule of thirds and you know exactly where your shots are going to go. I hope that you can take this and use it directly the next time you pick up your camera or your phone. Let me know how it goes. Leave a comment below if this is something that you learned today. I hope you find this helpful. Also, go look at other videos and other movies to see if they fit within the rule of thirds. I think you'll be surprised in how much you see from now on. For next time, this is Erin, and I'll see you in the next video.